Hi everyone, thanks for coming. This is the MassDOT Rail and Transit Division FY20 Community Transit Grant Program Orientation Webinar. We know everyone's really busy with everything that's going on, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. This is the there we go. So we've got most of the MassDOT Transit team here today. I'm Alex Cox. I'm the Grants Program Manager for MassDOT Rail and Transit. We've also got Jenna Henning, our Grants Management Specialist, Lauren Richmond, our Finance Program Coordinator, Trevor Baird Murray, our Transit Compliance Officer, Tatiana Sisk, our Asset Management Coordinator, and we're also joined by Greg Sakinski from the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights. So the purpose of today's webinar, as you all know, is past grant recipients, is to basically go more in depth to the issues that we touched on in the application trainings that occurred last spring before everyone applied. And to go more in depth into the topics that you need to know as MassDOT grantees. Here's the program timeline to show where we are now. We're approaching the end of the FY20 grant cycle. As I mentioned, we had the application trainings last May. We went through the project selection and approval process last summer. Now we're in the contracting period, and we are approaching vehicle deliveries in May and June. So today we're going to be talking about some resources that are available to you as grantees. And then Lauren's going to be talking about contracts and expense reimbursement. And then Trevor and Greg are going to be talking to you about compliance, civil rights, procurement guidelines. Tatiana is going to be talking to you about asset management. And then Tatiana and Jenna are going to be talking about reporting requirements, both for vehicle recipients and for operating and mobility management recipients. And then we're also going to be talking to you about the training requirements and the MAtap program. So the first area that we're going to talk about is the resources for grantees. As you're all familiar with the Grants Plus system, most of the resources are available in here in the Resources tab. When you log in, if you click on Global Resources, then you'll find all of these here. Obviously, we have many things available, but some of the most important things are guides on how to submit invoices, how to change projects in Grants Plus, how to report your milestones, the work plan template for operating and mobility management projects, a vehicle reporting user guide for vehicle recipients, how to register titles, as well as documents related to the compliance program and the Title VI resources that Greg will be talking about. And this presentation will also be in there as well after today. And also in there, you'll find the MassDOT Grant Program Guidebook. We have the electronic version available in the Resources tab, and we can also mail physical copies upon request. This guide is effective as of 2017, so we're going to be updating it in the near future, but there's still a lot of great information in there that you can find. And now I'm going to turn it over to Lauren to talk about contracts and expense reimbursements.
Hi, good morning. This is Lauren Richmond. I'm the finance manager from Rail and Transit. So I'm responsible for the contracts and invoice payments. I'm your point of contact. So let's go through the first chart. So Contracts are provided through MassDOT through a standard contract form. I will be sending them out to you, and just note that 2 original copies have to be returned to me. The fiscal department requires original copies for legal purposes. So the contract, it's going to list the responsibilities between MassDOT and the grantee, performance expectations, deliverables. It has the contract start date, the end date, and for these contracts, they're effective 1/1/2020, end date is 12/31/2020. They also contain legal terms. There's 5 pages, so you really should read through all of them before you sign. And as I stated, please send the originals back to me. Once the contract's fully executed, the contract manager will receive a copy through email. If you require an original, just let me know, and I'll send out. I'll have you return 3 copies instead. So all grantees are required to have a DUNS number and active status in sam.gov. If you don't have a DUNS number, you have to go onto the Duns and Bradstreet website, fill out the form, receive a DUNS number, go into sam.gov, and fill out those forms also. And eventually you will receive an active status. So to receive federal funding, you have to have an active status in sam.gov. Operating and mobility management projects, a work plan will be completed prior to contracting, and Jenna Henning will be contacting you regarding that. MassDOT terms and conditions, if not on file, I will be sending you that form to fill out and send back the original also. In addition, if you are a new vendor to the Commonwealth, certain forms are required to set you up as a vendor. A W-9, an EFT form, the terms and conditions, and a CASL form, which is the signatory authorized to sign the contracts. So I will be notifying you if you are not a vendor of the Commonwealth. If you are a vendor, no need to fill those forms out. So once the contract is fully executed within MassDOT, you will receive the notice to proceed. And as I said, the start date is January 1st. So grantees will be contacted by me or Kevin McGrath, who is the Rail and Transit intern. And I believe he's reached out to all of you for forms that are required. So within Grants Plus, as Alex had mentioned, there's the resource tab, and you'll see all those forms that I just mentioned, the W-9, the EFT, the CASL, which is contractor authorized signatory form, and terms and conditions. And we will let you know if those are required. So please don't send them in, just wait to hear from us, myself or Kevin. So expense reimbursements. Once the contract is fully executed, you can submit the invoice through Grants Plus, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. And the invoice service date should be within the contract terms, which is January through December. I prefer monthly reimbursements versus quarterly or yearly. FTA likes to see the monthly invoices to see that there's progress on the project. So for documentation, capital, which is the mobility management, vendor invoices are required and proof of payment. For operating and mobility management, please retain the original invoices at your office for audit purposes and provide the copies to me. So, sorry, within the contracts tab within Grants Plus, I will send you the link to the contract, and this is what it will look like within the contracts tab. So in an example, Hilltown Community Development, you can see that they have contracts from 2017 to 2019. In there, you will see the link to the contract, and you can print it out. And as I said, sign 2 copies, return them to me. This is just another page of what the contract file looks like. And then within the contract tab on the left, you will see contract profile, invoices, drawdowns, and milestone reporting. So to submit an invoice, you would select the invoice tab on the left. You would select the button that says add new, and it has you fill out certain information within the invoice form. Here's a sample of the form. So it would be the service dates, a brief comment as to what the invoice is related to. You would add receipts, which includes the, I believe it includes the service dates, and then there's a button for total amount of invoice and then dot reimbursement. So the dot reimbursement for operating projects, it would be 50% of the net operating costs, which is total operating costs for the month, minus revenues received or donations received related to the project, and the net amount is the dot amount requested. So it's 50% of net operating cost. So for mobility management, it would be MassDOT pays 80% of the net mobility management cost, and the local match is provided by the subrecipient, which is you. So once this form is filled out and you attach the invoice information, which is on the bottom, it says invoice documents, you would upload copies of the documents, save it, and then submit. And that next is the compliance related module. But prior to that, does anybody have any questions?
I don't think I have questions.
No. What about this one? Ginny? Hi, it looks like there's a question from Ginny Salem.
Hi.
Hi, we can hear you. So, Ginny, it looks like we're having technical difficulties. Why don't you, I'm sure Alex is going to provide my email address. Why don't you send the question to me, and then we'll get back to you right away.
Yep, and you can also submit questions in the, you can type questions and submit them to us on the side as well.
Good morning. This is Trevor Baird Murray, the Transit Compliance Officer. We're on to everybody's favorite section, transit compliance. I've got about 30 slides I want to go through, but in the interest of time, and I know you folks are busy, extremely busy, I am not going to spend that much time on each individual slide. What I'd like for you to do, though, is to think of this PowerPoint presentation as a sort of a resource that you can consult from time to time. And of course, please feel free to contact me directly with any specific questions about any of the areas that we cover. But I just do want to stress, though, that as a compliance officer, I'm responsible for visiting with folks, making sure that their programs and their administration of that program is compliant, both with federal and state requirements. But I am mindful, again, of the environment, the current environment in which we work, and that there are other challenges that you folks are facing. So with that in mind, I just want to talk a little bit about our compliance program. I'm going to talk about the areas that we review, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on procurement and one or two other issues that I have found are problematic when I visit with folks throughout the Commonwealth. The application, all of these requirements come to you, you agencies, through the annual certifications and assurances, which is a document that the FTA publishes yearly. and it specifies the requirements that MassDOT must follow. Previously, we used to have organizations sign these documents directly, but I think that's not been the case. That was not accurate. And so what we've done instead is we've made this document available for all organizations to download through Grants Plus, acknowledge that they reviewed it, and provide assurance to MassDOT that they will assist MassDOT with meeting those requirements. And I'm going to go over in one slide how we do that. In addition to these certifications and assurances, there are terms and conditions that are attached to the contract documents. Those also specify some of the requirements that will flow to you. And in addition, because we are talking about 5310 grant funding, federal grant funding, there are grant-specific circulars and FTA directives that come out periodically that we must seek some enforcement on. Broadly speaking, there are 3 objectives to the compliance review, and that is, of course, to comply with federal and state laws and regulations, identify and promote good practices, and identify training and technical assistance needs. Most of our time spent on the road is with the 3rd objective, and that is seeking compliance, assuring compliance with federal and state regulations. So the next slide is, okay. So again, this is the certifications and assurances. This is how we've set it up now. As you can see, it's in the, every organization will have a tab like this. On the left, you'll see certification, and you'll have the option of, once the 2020 certifications and assurances are up and running, download it, sign it, and provide assurance to us through by checking that checkbox here that you are willing to assist MassDOT with what the requirements are in this document. And just as a reminder, all the RTAs know this who are in attendance, and most of these requirements don't apply directly to organizations, but there are 1 or 2 that do, and again, that's what we're looking for assurances of. A quick second about the compliance site visit. First, we do a desk review. We take a look at documentation relating to your programs. We will then send out a questionnaire. The questionnaire is going to ask for responses to some questions. It's going to ask for some documents, and if we determine that an additional site visit is necessary, then we will set up a date and come out and we will visit you. And from there, we will compile from that visit a final report, and we will be in consultation with every organization about the timeframe in meeting the potential findings, and we will work, of course, with subrecipients to resolve these deficiencies identified in the review. So that's the process as we speak. It's usually a 6-month notice. We give you 6 weeks notice, so that you folks are prepared to speak with us about your programs. This is an example of one organization out there that we did a compliance review of. Again, this is in the organization tab. If you go to the Oversight tab on the left, you will see the review questionnaire that we've provided to organizations. The organization then sends back a completed questionnaire. We review and approve it, and then we are usually good to go, either with respect to setting up a site visit or concluding the review, depending on what the documentation indicates. The thing I want to stress here, though, is all of this is done online at this point. We designed the system deliberately. We technically don't have to physically go out there and visit with you once we get all the documents in and we're satisfied with the program. My tendency, though, is to request a site visit with organizations that are new to the program or have need additional follow-up. So this is an example of some findings. This is the conclusion of a compliance review. This has nothing to do with the organization that was in the previous slide. This is a separate organization entirely. I'm happy to report that the previous grantee had no findings, but this organization did, and this is how we present them, and this is how we organize our system so that you provide particular documentation depending on the area of review. Quick, I just want to draw your attention to the review area and the type and the description. If you look under the type, you'll see that there's a deficiency, and then there's what we call an REC, or a recommendation. The FDA expects that if we come up with another alternative to something that your program is doing, that we provide that as a form of technical assistance. With respect to the DEF, the deficiency, those are musts. Those will be findings that need to be corrected or updated. So that's what the compliance review is going to look like, at least online. This is how you access it. These are the protocols and the processes to provide us the information that we're looking for. Three broad areas for review. I'm going to touch on each of these areas as we proceed. The first one is administration and management, operations and service provision, and planning and marketing and civil rights, which we're also responsible for reviewing when we're out there. Taking the first one, project management, we look to see that grantees have the technical capacity to implement the projects, to manage the grants, and comply with FDA requirements. What we're doing here is that we're looking at agency structures, we're looking at policies, how they've been formally documented, how they've been provided to the employees. We look for sort of the administrative components to all of this. How are you keeping track of the driver training? And can you document to us that you are able to determine on a day-to-day basis what drivers need what training and other practices like that? We also look at the financial management system for those of you who are seeking funding for mobility management projects. And if there are any issues with respect to invoices that have been submitted that Lauren, our financial coordinator, has identified. And we also look to make sure that if there are organizations out there that we're providing funding for you to provide them, we look to make sure that they're being reimbursed within a reasonable period of time. So the administration and management, the procurement will apply directly to, this is an area that I want to focus in as part of that earlier review. This is the sort of the one of the biggest issues that we've come across on our site visits. Procurement is also the #1 area that the FDA has findings for with respect to organizations and with respect to the state administrative agencies. It applies, procurement itself and the review that we conduct applies to only grantees that are receiving operating assistance for goods or services. So if you are applying to MassDOT for a vehicle and MassDOT is procuring that vehicle, this does not apply to you. But for those organizations out there who intend to use some funding received through the 5310 program to bid or purchase goods or services, then we will be reviewing the procurement portion of how you administer your grant. So as I said, MassDOT will purchase the vehicle. If you're looking for a vehicle, MassDOT does the procurement, so organizations don't have to worry about that. We negotiate the price for vehicle features. We execute the contracts with the vehicle dealers. We enter into direct agreement for added, the grantees, if they need additional features in the vehicle, they're responsible for entering into that agreement with the dealer themselves. Delivery of vehicles is anticipated in, we haven't updated that. May, June of 2020. So the delivery of vehicles, for those who are receiving vehicles, we anticipate that to be in May or June of 2020. So procurement continued. Just as again, just to emphasize this, all federal grant dollars used to purchase outside services or equipment must be procured in accordance with state and federal guidance. I'm looking at the attendance policy for today's webinar, and I'm seeing towns, I'm seeing RTAs, I'm seeing some large organizations out there. I'm not going to presume to lecture any of these folks or provide any information to these folks on how to procure goods or services. The expectation is that you have a procurement policy in place that's fully documented, and that we are only there really to review that you have such a policy and that you followed it when you procure the goods and services. The FDA's expectation is that in all procurements, we as the state administrative agency, are able to identify the procurement that an organization has followed. They leave it to the states to make their own determination as to what that procurement policy would look like. But they ask specifically when they do a review of MassDOT to assure them that there's a procurement policy that each organization must follow. This is the procurement review sheet that we use when we go out on the road. These are the documents that we look for to make sure that every organization has on file. So again, this is available in this webinar, and I'm happy to discuss this further if there are any questions on this. Cities and towns out there, you're going to follow Mass General Law 30B. RTAs, they've got their own procurement process. For any organization out there, no matter what they're following, whether it's the state 30B or their own procurement policy, if you're using federal funds, and this is the takeaway, if you're using federal funds, you've got to make sure that the required federal clauses are contained in each of these procurement contracts. To determine what these clauses are, these are the resources that I would recommend. The circular is FTA Circular 4220, and the FTA also publishes a best practices procurement manual, and the most recent version is 2016. So if you go to the FTA, go to the FTA's procurement website. This is the third-party contracting guidance. As you can see, there's a PDF of the of the guidance there that you can download, take a look at, and that should provide you with the necessary clauses depending on how much funding we're talking about. Regardless, in addition to the federal clauses, really what we're looking for when we're looking at procurements is that there are written procurement procedures that are board approved. In other words, we're not looking for a procurement policy that someone just invented over the last weekend. We need to make sure that there's a board approved official policy in place, and that the policy was in place prior to the procurement. We are required to look at dates just to make sure that this policy was implemented and around prior to the actual procurement of these goods or services. I mentioned to you the required federal contract clauses, but I also want to mention, and this is a bigger emphasis recently with the FTA, is the written code of standards of ethical conduct. They are looking for this. They want to make sure that every person that touches this procurement are included on those written standards of conduct. And they're actually looking for, the FTA that is, they're looking for documentation that these folks have received and understand what the standards are. Again, because we're talking about federal funds, once you include the federal clauses, we are making also sure that the process itself was open and competitive and that there are no geographic restrictions. We're talking about federal funds here. These are not state funds. So the federal government expects that any bidding with federal dollars is nationwide. We can't restrict bidding processes to a state organization or an organization that only functions in Massachusetts, for example. Third-party contracting guidance I discussed, and again, these are the actual clauses. If you go to the actual circular, this will give you the required clauses depending on the type of procurement and the dollar value involved. So this document should be consulted just to make sure that you have all the required clauses in that procurement. State procurement resources for the 30B folks, as you know, this is the State Office of Inspector General. They have procurement charts. They're dated 2018, and this is what it looks like. Again, depending on the dollar value, 10,000, 50, 10 to 50,000, or over 50,000, there are certain processes that you must follow. Again, even though this is a state procurement that an organization is following, the FTA expects us to be able to identify what that procurement was and whether or not this organization followed it. Again, for technical assistance, the FTA is available at their website here. All right, so that was the first part of the review area. The second area is operations and service provision. And this computer has a mind of its own. It keeps skipping. So I'm going to talk about asset oversight, drug and alcohol, and I'm going to spend half a second on charter bus and school bus. Asset oversight maintenance is probably the #1 area for findings that we have as we tour the state. Organizations are telling us that they are maintaining their vehicles, but when we ask them to document how they maintain the vehicles, very often organizations lack that ability. So maintenance, quickly, folks have to maintain all vehicles at a high level of cleanliness, safety, and mechanical soundness. And at a minimum, every organization has to have a maintenance plan, and that maintenance plan has to reflect at a minimum the manufacturer's maintenance requirements. Every vehicle will get a manual. Every manual will have a recommended timetable for maintenance schedules, and we will make sure that the plans represent this, and that the organization is able to document when these actual services took place, these maintenance proceedings took place. One of the areas that we found is that, again, organizations are not able to document it as fully as they thought they could, or that there's a sort of a disconnect between some towns, their councils on aging, for example, and the town's maintenance facility. But we expect that the recipient of these funds, again, is able to work with their maintenance department in providing us the assurance that the vehicles are being maintained. One of the areas also that I do when I'm out on the road is actually take a look at the vehicles themselves, and I review the cleanliness, I review whether all the safety equipment is there. I get out my little calculator and I will sort of do a review of the mileage and maintenance, and expect that, again, maintenance is being performed at the required interval levels. Again, this is not something that I came up with by myself. I don't particularly like calculators, but this is an FTA requirement. So, so don't be surprised. Also, I want to emphasize the pre-trip inspection program. Before the vehicle goes out on the road daily, we've got to see a checklist to make sure that the organization has taken a look at the vehicle itself and made sure that there are no safety issues. And if there are safety issues, that there's a process in place for correcting them. Maintenance, so asset oversight. We also look at insurance, adequate insurance. We look at spare ratio. We look at the review maintenance plans, and again, to assure us that the vehicle is going to be taken care of, and that the organization has the wherewithal to sort of administer a vehicle. Now, with respect to the 5310 lease agreements, this applies directly to the RTAs out there in the room, those who haven't left, who haven't abandoned this webinar. The FTA expects us, requires us actually, to review every lease agreement that a subrecipient plans on entering into with a subrecipient of their vehicle. So if you're receiving a vehicle and then you intend to lease that vehicle out to a smaller organization, MassDOT has to review and approve that lease in writing. If we don't, it's a finding on MassDOT, and it's a specific question that they included as part of their review recently of MassDOT. Much to my surprise, what they did was they took a look at the dates of all these letters and the lease agreement and emails, and when we approved these leases. So they're looking at not just that we review the leases, but we review them in a timely, recognizable order. So again, I want to emphasize this. This is not a should, it's a must. So RTAs, please forward to me lease agreements. I will review them and approve them in writing quickly, I hope, just to make sure that all the necessary 5310 requirements are included. I also review TAM status. If you folks if it's applicable, most organizations it won't be applicable. But we send out a questionnaire to organizations every year, checking to see if they're eligible or should be required to participate in a TAM. Please pay attention to that document. I'm required to review town plans their adequacy when I'm on the road. Asset maintenance, incidental use such as meal delivery is allowable as long as the use does not interfere with the project service identified in the grantee's contract. Stepping back, folks, big picture here is that the FTA want to see these assets being used. And these assets are vehicles, but they can't be used for unauthorized purposes. But they do not want to see vehicles just sitting there being used once or twice a week. That's grounds for reallocation of assets. So please be mindful of that. And we've got further details in our guidebook, which Alex referenced earlier. Operations and service provision, charter bus don't do it, school bus don't do it, with some exceptions. I've never come across this in any of my reviews, but if you've got questions relative to each of these areas, please contact me. Drug and alcohol, again, I'm only involved in the drug and alcohol part, usually with respect to our larger organizations, the RTAs. Quickly, it doesn't apply to 5310 subrecipients. The 5310 subrecipients are the folks who are receiving the vehicles or using operating funds to procure goods, unless you have CDL drivers. If your drivers have a CDL license and they're going to be operating these vehicles, then you've got to consult with the Federal Motor Carrier and Safety Act. There are required testing requirements for those. So again, 5310, drug and alcohol is not applicable unless your drivers are CDL drivers. For those organizations out there who are larger organizations, 5311, 5307, the RTAs, rural RTAs, you've got to include the drivers in the testing. Specifically, subrecipients that receive only 6310 funding program assistance are not subject to FTA's drug and alcohol testing rules, but must comply with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. And those regulations can be found at 49 CFR Part 382. For 5310 recipients and subrecipients that also receive funding under one of the covered programs, as I said, the RTAs mostly, or 5309s, please include these employees in the regular drug testing program. This is a huge oversight process. They're rather complicated. And again, we visit and review these programs for their adequacy. These are the reporting requirements for those who are in drug and alcohol. And again, the vast majority of folks out there, this is not going to apply to. But just know what these reporting requirements are. Drug and alcohol technical assistance can be provided at the FTA's Office of Safety and Oversight. And there's the contact information there. So that's operations and service provision. Planning and marketing. I'm going to hand this over to my colleague, Greg, and he's going to talk about DBEO, ADA, and Title VI. And we've got some very exciting news about Title VI. I know you all can't wait for the news, but I think we've managed to streamline our process here. So hang tight. Here's Greg.
So maybe while we're transitioning here, we can do another check for any quick questions in the chat window. And
I don't see any questions. Oh, I do. I've got a whole list. Oh, no. No, I don't see any questions. So, but again, any specific areas you want me to review, happy to do so offline. And my contact information is going to be provided a little bit later. Thank you.
Before we transition, did you want to actually cover DBE as part of the procurement content? To close that loop, since it's
okay. All right. So Greg has asked me to stay. Sorry.
Just for continuity's sake.
Sure. Title VI.
I think DBE is after.
So Greg is going to go to Title VI. DBE requirements, again, for those organizations out there that are not procuring goods or services, this will not apply to you. If you're just receiving a vehicle through this grant funding, this will not apply to you. But for everybody else, where there's a potential for this to apply, we are monitoring DBE participation to add to MassDOT's overall DBE goal. Specifically, under CFR Part 26, this is a definition of subrecipient. MassDOT has an overall numerical DBE goal, and as part of receiving these funds, each organization is required to assist MassDOT in achieving that goal. All recipients that award US DOT assisted contracts must follow 49 CFR Part 26, including the insertion of applicable non-discrimination clauses in agreements and contracts. DBE is a whole discipline. We've got a whole department devoted to this, but I just want to give you the sort of the heads up about what our expectations are and sort of information that you may need to contact us with if you've got specific questions. So again, these are the responsibilities. This is what the documentation is that we're looking for. Any opportunity out there to contract for subcontracting opportunities, we want to know what those are. So if you're receiving funding for printing services, we need to know the area, what kind of printing you folks will be doing, and then what we will do is we'll take a look at our own codes that are specific to these regions, these locations, and see if there are DBs out there that this organization should be awarding their funds to or consulting with. This is an example of the semi-annual reporting. Again, once you receive procurement, once you're bidding on goods or services, we need to first know what kind of program plan of funding, whether or not there are applicable DBEs, and then secondly, we need to get these annual reporting complete. We need to know the type of work that the DBE is working on, the amount of money spent, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we're looking for data for the period from October 1st to March 31st. It's got to be submitted by April 30th. And from April 1st to September 30th, it's got to be submitted by October 30th. So those are the reporting deadlines. Again, just know if you're procuring, there's a DBE component to this, the reporting requirements, and there's some specific information that you need to be providing us before it goes out to bid so that we can identify potential DBE organizations. I think this is the same contract. So again, what we're looking for in our DBE program is that subrecipients are also required to create and maintain a bidders list consisting of information about all DBE and non-DBE firms. And again, that bidders list is the document I just reviewed. We need to know who the subcontractors were that bid, and we need to know that this information is provided to us by September 30th of each year. We're looking for the firm name, the firm contact information, their status, DBE or non-DBE, the age of the firm, and the annual gross receipts of the firm by categories. So again, procurement, DBE, it's a big area. Consult with us first. I'll have folks from our Civil Rights Department work directly with each organization and review their potential bid. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So let me roll back to Title VI. And here's Greg.
All right. Hi, folks. This is Greg Subchinski. I'm with MassDOT's Office of Diversity and Civil Rights, where I focus on kind of our public-facing non-discrimination programs under Title VI under the ADA. So those are the areas that I'll be covering here today. I think we also have some EEO content, which we'll go over as well. So we're very purposefully kind of including this content, this civil rights content, in the compliance section because that's certainly how we view it here at MassDOT. We don't want anybody to be left with the wrong impression that these are somehow separate requirements, add-on requirements, secondary requirements, or anything like that. For us, these federal civil rights non-discrimination requirements are absolutely part and parcel with the rest of our compliance obligations under these programs and in the management of these funds. So in the way that we're looking for, vehicle maintenance documentation, the same way we're looking for documentation around, Title VI compliance. We kind of consider it all one and the same. For those of you who attended kind of the earlier session at the start of this application process, just to make sure we're all kind of on the same page here, we're talking about for the most part, federal laws that come that either follow the money that we're talking about through this grant program, or simply reach your organizations by virtue of the type of services that you're providing to the public. And we're talking about non-discrimination requirements, offering services in an equitable manner, in an accessible manner, in a way that doesn't discriminate on the basis of the federal protected categories: race, color, national origin, language, income, things like that, disability status. So that's the kind of mindset that we're operating in here. That's the kind of topic area that we're covering. So we're going to focus on Title VI now after the DBE section. Title VI is, if you recall, it's one of those areas where there aren't any kind of threshold requirements for this for these obligations to apply other than receiving federal financial assistance. So by participating in this program, by applying for these federal funds through the state managed program, if you receive a vehicle, if you receive operating dollars, if you receive any kind of federal financial assistance through this program, these Title VI obligations around public-facing non-discrimination requirements reach your organization. It's a follow the money kind of operation. And I just want to drive the point home that not only are we looking at these compliance requirements as kind of part and parcel of the full participation in this program, but we're also not treating any of these reporting obligations or demonstrations of compliance as occurring in a vacuum. At the very least, as you and your organizations undertake the process of developing Title VI plans and submitting that to us, it's not just not only is it not just a document that was supposed to sit on the shelf somewhere as kind of a demonstration of compliance. It's supposed to actually inform your daily activities, but it's also something that then MassDOT is being reviewed for when our federal partners come in and take a kind of a compliance audit of our operations. They're also looking to make sure that we are providing the kind of oversight of our subrecipients and the kind of technical assistance to our subrecipients that ensures that they are understanding these obligations and able to meet these obligations. So not only does the kind of dollar amount flow through in terms of these obligations, but this kind of compliance, demonstration of compliance kind of follows through as well, through us all the way up to our federal partners. So as Trevor mentioned or alluded to with some excitement in his voice, we have kind of a new process that we've envisioned for Title VI compliance for this cycle. This is something that existing program participants can certainly take advantage of, as well as new program participants are going to be kind of experiencing kind of a new lean, mean, streamlined, more effective process here, we all hope. We wanted to direct you to the kind of resources that we're going to be making available for all of you to go through the process of creating a Title VI program, right? Because that's really kind of the crux of demonstrating to us, and then us being able to demonstrate to FTA that our subrecipients are in compliance with Title VI. So some of you might be familiar with the kind of resources that we had on Grants Plus in the past related to Title VI, where we would encourage you to adopt major components of MassDOT's Title VI program. But there was some concerns that maybe that wasn't quite right-sized for all of our subrecipient organizations participating in this program. So rather than going through the kind of clunky process of taking all of MassDOT's complaint process, all of MassDOT's notice, and all of MassDOT's public participation plan, and language access plan, and trying to figure out how it fits your organizations, Trevor and I have been working on a more streamlined program development kind of template, which is what you'll now find available on Grants Plus, where you have some more pointed questions that guide you through the process of developing those core components of a Title VI program that's kind of more in line with your operations, the size of your organization, the kind of capacity that you can all demonstrate to, to kind of customize or tailor any of these program components to your unique operations. For reference, if anybody wants to see, kind of the full list of Title VI requirements, you see a reference here to the FTA's Title VI circular, which is 4702.1b, where you can certainly take a deep dive, but really the intention of this Title VI program development template is to allow you to focus on the template itself. The template will give you the kind of requirements for each section, compliance requirements for each section, and then some instructions about how to demonstrate that you're fulfilling it. There might be something like applying your agency name to a draft notice template. It might be something like adopting a complaint process that you then disseminate throughout your office, something like that. But all of those instructions will be contained within the template work plan itself, rather than having to consult the source documents. So based on the schedule that we talked about earlier in terms of vehicle delivery and the start of the contract and kind of projecting forward from there, we are looking for submission of these Title VI programs generated by these templates by October 15th, 2020. We believe that lines up with the other kind of quarterly reporting requirements that you're already going to be focusing on at that time with this program and with the receipt of these funds. So it'll just become part of that quarterly report, facilitated obviously through Grants Plus. And then right. And as Trevor is reminding me here, we're talking about kind of a draft form submission by October 15th, 2020, because then we here at MassDOT will take some time to review those submissions and provide any kind of necessary comments, feedback, what have you, for any adjustments, revisions, additions, whatever it might be, or notification that things are in good standing. So we hope, we're aiming to get back to you by the end of the calendar year, by December 31st, 2020, with the results of that review. And then based on the result, either you're in good standing, or there might be some revisions needed, and based on the extent of the revisions, we'll figure out the amount of time, 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, whatever it might be. So specific issues to keep in mind, just to kind of help you get ahead of these Title VI compliance areas. So we're talking about public non-discrimination requirements. So of course, that could mean that you'd receive a complaint. A member of the public, a customer, a potential customer, a rider, might allege that something was done in a discriminatory manner. If you receive that kind of complaint, it's absolutely recommended that you reach out to us to coordinate in the intake of that complaint, and then of course processing that complaint appropriately. So you'll see reference to that in the template complaint process, that you should check in with us, you should check in with the transit compliance officer, you should check in with civil rights staff, just so that we're all comfortable with the way that that's being handled. I mentioned this a moment ago, but second bullet here, making sure that all of your staff is aware of these obligations. For some of you that haven't received federal financial assistance in the past, these obligations might be new. These federal civil rights programs might be new. They might be new concepts for your staff. So we certainly want to see some efforts made to disseminate this information to staff with some instructions about the fact that, you'll see a new notice posted in our lobby of our office. You'll see a complaint form available on our website and at our reception desk. You'll see complaint procedures, available at our reception desk or something like that, should somebody have a question about them. So just so that if a member of the public comes in and asks or alludes to the fact that they'd like to file a complaint or something like that, everybody on staff will know, oh, absolutely, we have the resources that you need right here. So it makes it kind of seamless, and there's no confusion. Let's see. The third bullet here, just to reiterate, this is certainly part of the compliance process, as Trevor mentioned, even with the site visits. One of the things that he and the compliance folks will be looking for is demonstrating that you've posted the Title VI notice in vehicles, in your office, on your website, demonstrating that you have the complaint form available, things like that. So this is certainly something that's going to be checked proactively. So the more front work you're able to do to make sure that it's all out in the world, the better. And then just because we get this question sometimes as we manage this program year to year, some of you may have existing Title VI compliance requirements and reporting requirements because you've been receiving federal funds through other sources. You might be an RTA and you're already receiving FTA funding directly from FTA, so you have a Title VI reporting relationship already established there. Or maybe some of your municipalities have already been receiving federal funds through other sources. You might have pre-existing Title VI programs in place. If that's the case, we are certainly going to, defer to the existing plans on file and the status of those existing plans on file. So if FDA has already come along and approved your Title VI program as an RTA, we are just going to, defer to that program approval for any of our kind of compliance purposes. So let's see. So we're shifting gears here away from Title VI, but still talking about kind of public-facing non-discrimination requirements. Quickly, just to touch on ADA. We've already seen ADA covered actually largely throughout this whole presentation, which I think is a good thing for all recipients, all subrecipients through this process, because when we're talking about ADA compliance in this area, there's public-facing compliance, we're really saying we want to make sure that you're operating accessible vehicles, and of course, we are conducting the vehicle procurement for you, so the vehicles we're providing are fully accessible. So as long as you're operating the vehicles we're providing, you're maintaining those vehicles in operable condition, and certainly any accessible features that they might have, like lifts or anything like that, as long as you're maintaining those in operable condition, then you're kind of going a long way to demonstrating compliance with ADA accessibility requirements there. And then other things will kind of follow as a matter of course. We'll certainly see that you're conducting the required driver trainings, which will include ADA components around how to work with riders with disabilities, and what the requirements are there under the 5310 program in particular. So really the way that we see this process play out is that you're able to demonstrate compliance with ADA requirements by meeting these kind of other compliance requirements with the vehicles that we're operating, the training that the drivers are receiving, and so on. There are some other things that we would look for that aren't necessarily readily evident in terms of the vehicle that we're operating or training that we're getting, and that would be things like accessible communications. Again, notifying the public of their rights under these legal protections, trying to be proactive in whether we're disseminating hard copy information or electronic information to customers or to potential riders, making sure that those materials are accessible, making sure that websites are accessible, the documents are accessible. That can include everything from kind of color contrast considerations to layout to font sizes, and then of course being able to make adjustments for customers that might make a request around, I need something in a larger font, or I need a Braille version of a notice or something like that, being able to provide that. Again, this is an area where you're not necessarily likely to encounter these kinds of requests on a regular basis. So if you do, please feel free to reach out to us, reach out to Rail and Transit, reach out to Civil Rights, and we can certainly kind of guide you through the process. And again, we have a lot of resource material available to cover these obligations in the kind of compliance summary sheets on Grants Plus, and other resource materials in the program guide that we make available. So if you have any questions, you can certainly consult those and reach out to us. And then let's see, lastly, wanted to touch very briefly on EEO, or Equal Employment Opportunity. So we've covered the kind of non-discrimination requirements that cover your provision of service towards the public, so Title VI and ADA. We've covered the civil rights requirement in your procurement activities if you're using operating funds to secure goods and services. Now we're shifting gears to kind of the internal facing side of the civil rights compliance requirements, and that's EEO or Title VII. So I'll be very brief here because, as you see, there's kind of a threshold requirement for whether or not these obligations really apply to your organizations in full. And those thresholds have to do with the number of employees you have, transit-related employees specifically. So you have to have 50 or more transit-related employees in your organization. And then there's a couple of dollar benchmarks in terms of the amount of federal financial assistance that you're receiving in capital or operating funds. Because it's unlikely that many or most organizations participating in this program are going to be exceeding these thresholds, we won't spend a lot of time here. For anybody that does exceed those thresholds, we're certainly available for consultation in terms of meeting these requirements. But as you see the requirements on the screen, at this point, I'm sure they're sounding kind of familiar in terms of developing a policy, maintaining a notice, disseminating information about the plan, assigning the responsibilities to a member of staff that's able to follow up on these requirements, and we can get into more details for anybody who would need to know them as we go forward here. And I think that's it for the civil rights section of compliance. Trevor, I don't know if you had any final thoughts here.
Yeah, I'm not sure why I put the slide in, but I guess I had final thoughts. So I think be adaptive would be one of my recommendations. The circulars change, new directives come out. Don't be upset with MassDOT. It's not our fault. We're trying to behave, and we seek compliance with this. But we're here as a resource. So remember that it's rare. But I wouldn't be surprised some of these programs, frankly, are going to be tinkered with over the next couple of this period, in terms of the audience, in terms of the intended people that they meant to serve. And again, as I said, we're available as a resource. And just please pay attention to procurement. Please pay attention to asset maintenance and asset management. I work closely with the asset manager who's going to speak next. We rely heavily on those asset management reports to determine compliance with our program. So that's it. Again, thank you, and feel free to call me, email me with any questions relative to any of this information. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tatiana Sisk. I represent asset management. And I want to start the presentation with the question, what is asset management? Asset management is basically a cycle of events that includes the delivery of the vehicle, operations, maintenance, fixing the vehicle, and reporting on regular basis, as well as a replacement. So I work very closely with our grant management, grant management team, Jenna and Alex. I also work with our finance manager, Lauren, and our compliance officer, Trevor, very closely. So we work as a team, and if you have any questions related to asset management, I would be the right point of contact to start the conversation. So I would like to briefly mention on the requirements related to asset management, but those requirements were already communicated by Trevor, so I wouldn't spend too much time on these slides. When you receive the new vehicle, you are required to register the vehicle with RMV and list the MassDOT as a first lien holder. We maintain the titles until the final disposition. So please make sure that you register the vehicle listing MassDOT as a first lien holder. Some new changes that are coming up starting on July 1st, 2020. As you can see, this chart, it shows vehicle type, capacity, and the useful life age that changed for a couple of vehicles types. For type A, type E, and type E2, it changed to 6 years. And the useful life mileage as well is listed on this table. Vehicle transfer, there is a reason to include this in our slide. Organization can request a transfer of their vehicle if the grantee is going out of business, if the mission has changed and the organization is no longer providing the transportation services, organizational or jurisdictional site consolidation, or service changes. So that has to be communicated to us, to asset management and compliance officer in writing. There are also reasons when MassDOT may initiate the transfer, and it's as Trevor mentioned earlier, the underutilization of a vehicle, improper use of the vehicle, insufficient technical capacity determined via required monthly and annual reporting, compliance site visits, and performance reviews conducted by MassDOT. So again, as I mentioned, as what Trevor mentioned earlier, reporting and maintaining the vehicles properly is important to keep the vehicles running properly and meeting the federal and state regulations and requirements. As far as the insurance, grantees are responsible for acquiring and maintaining current comprehensive insurance on the vehicles while under MassDOT lien. MassDOT must be listed as the loss payee and additionally insured when MassDOT is listed as the vehicle owner or lien holder. Grantees are required to carry workers' compensation insurance and must post a notice to employees. Grantees must maintain adequate property and liability insurance coverage. Maintenance. Again, Trevor already covered that the maintenance is critical. Grantees must maintain all vehicles at a high level of cleanliness, safety, and mechanical soundness. Vehicles must be maintained per the manufacturer's minimum maintenance requirements. Each grantee must establish a maintenance program that at a minimum meets those recommendations. Grantees are required to document all maintenance activities in a format that is readily available for review when requested by MassDOT. A pre-trip inspection program must be set up to ensure that safety and operational standards are consistently met for each vehicle. So in the next slide, I just want to highlight that grantees must report in writing via email within 24 hours if any vehicle incidents, accidents, or casualty to the asset management coordinator. In addition to that, within the reasonable time, please provide the date of the incident or accident, the VIN number that is involved, accident report that basically highlights the description of the accident, police report when it's available and when police is involved, and photos of any damage. When needed, MassDOT will provide additional guidance depending on the type of the incident or accident involved. I just would like to briefly mention FTA Transit Asset Management Rule. The TAM final rule effective date is October 1st, 2016. It provides a framework to measure and monitor asset performance and condition assets with asset replacement planning and sets targets to maintain a state of good repair. MassDOT is designated as a sponsor and must develop a group TAM plan for eligible Section 5310 and 5311 subrecipients. So the agency role in the group TAM plan is you need to designate an accountable executive, ensure MassDOT has a complete inventory of your assets, confirm that the condition of your assets on an annual basis, provide input on project prioritization, provide review and comment on the plan. Every year, MassDOT will reach out to your agency and request additional information, whether to confirm whether you are operating open or closed door services, and update the asset management TAM plan form, whether you are planning to participate within a group plan or develop your own TAM plan. Going to the reporting requirements related to asset management. There are two sets of reports that you would do on asset management related tasks. One of them is 5310 MAP vehicle report. It's a monthly report that is due by the 15th day of the next month for cities and towns and NGOs, non-for-profits. regional transit authorities have an extension, and the deadline to submit the monthly report is due by the 30th day of the next month. So please, if you look at the screen, you select Organization tab, and then you click Reporting, and then you add a new report and select 5310 map. Select 5310 map report to start. Within that 5310 map report, you select a year that you're reporting. So in this example, it shows 2017 and the period, which is the month that you're reporting. Once that shell of the report is created, you update the mileage and ridership information for each vehicle that you operate within 5310 map grant program. As well, if there are any issues with the vehicle during that month, like a mechanical issue, you would indicate within that report that that vehicle had an issue for that month. Annual capital equipment certification is also critical and is due by the 31st, by January 31st of the next year. So that report includes some critical information that you would normally have on hand for the year. That includes your insurance, that includes your maintenance plan, and the driver training certifications for each driver. And that report is also submitted on Grants Plus using the same organizational tab. When you go to reporting, you select capital equipment annual report certification and the year that you want to report. So in this case, in this example on the slide, shows 2017. Once that report is created, you would upload your insurance certification, you would upload your maintenance plan for that year, and you would also download the template and update the dates when the driver certification course was taken. At this time, I'm finalizing my asset management slides, and I'm want to see if any of you have any questions for me, or feel free to give me a call after this presentation or send me email. I'm more than happy to talk to you directly. If you don't have any questions, I'm giving a turn to my colleague Jenna. She will start her presentation on operating mobility management reporting requirements.
Thanks, Tatiana. Hey everyone, Jenna Henning here, the Grants Management Specialist. I'm just going to talk with you as quickly as I can while still getting the content across. I know we've been on this for quite some time, and I appreciate all of you that are still on here. So operating and mobility management reporting requirements. So for those of you who have either a mobility management project, operating and non-vehicle capital projects, you're going to have to report through Grants Plus, as many of the other people have talked about throughout the presentation. There's an example about this, and resources are available on the Grants Plus website, but we'll be requesting a narrative project update, including any milestone data information through Grants Plus on a quarterly basis. This work plan is something that all, ooh, these slides are advancing without any, there's a ghost. On a quarterly basis, and I'll talk about the submission timeline. You should expect an email from me today discussing the work plan a little bit more in depth. I was hoping to get out and visit with each of you to talk about this, but unfortunately we are not allowed to travel, so this will be done via phone call, and I'll work with each of the operating and mobility management recipients on setting up a time to talk about your work plan. But really what we're looking for here is just a narrative with a brief description of your program's progresses and accomplishments, milestone data is going to vary between project type. There's really no universal metrics for operating and mobility management projects because they do look so different. But I would like for each of you to attach an updated version of your work plan to each milestone report that you submit on a quarterly basis. And again, we'll talk about the timeline of that and the timeframes a little bit more in depth. There's an example of what the work plan looks like below. It's just the front page of it. We updated this format in fiscal year 2018, and it'll look the same for this coming year as well. If you go to the Resources tab on Grants Plus, there are some suggestions for quantitative metrics that can be found there, so you can sort of get an idea. And like I said, I'll send out an example of the work plan and some further information about how to develop it, so you guys can begin thinking about it before we have that phone call. And I just said this, so I don't need to repeat again, but that Resources tab is pretty important for all of you. All right, so moving on, I want to talk about training requirements and the Massachusetts Transit Assistance Program. So we are calling this MAtap, MAtap, however you want to say it. But so all individuals who operate a MassDOT funded vehicle must obtain and remain current with necessary state license requirements and state and federal required driver trainings for the safe operation of vehicles. I'll go over those requirements on the next slide, but it's the responsibility of each grantee to ensure that your drivers are in compliance, and we'll collect up-to-date driver training information annually, and we'll also verify records during on-site visits. So some of you have received an email about upcoming trainings. I just want to talk about, due to the coronavirus, all trainings are canceled for the foreseeable future, and we'll be in touch with information regarding that as it develops. So here are the driver training requirements. Defensive driving has to be done every 2 years, accessible lift use and securement every 2 years as well, disability awareness every 3 years. Drug and alcohol awareness safety is required only upon hire. CPR and first aid are done annually. The frequency varies. And then if you're familiar with the passenger assistance training, that's just a new hire training that combines that defensive drive, disability awareness, and accessible lift use into one training. So we have MATAP, which many of you are familiar with. It's the Massachusetts Rural Transit Assistance Program, and it's an FTA-funded state-administered program that offers training, education, and technical assistance designed to meet the needs of transportation providers for rural and small urban regions of Massachusetts. It offers the following type of assistance: driver training, which is offered free of charge throughout the year, and training scholarships, which are offered to offset costs associated with professional development. You can find additional information online at the link provided below. But again, these trainings are going to be postponed for the foreseeable future. In an effort to ensure compliance with federal and state certification requirements, we're also in the process of developing a driver training program for non-rural providers. So we are calling that one MATAP, the Massachusetts Urban Transit Assistance Program. And we're looking for it to function similarly to MATAP and provide free trainings for recipients in Greater Boston and other urbanized areas in the Commonwealth. So more information about this these training sessions and the timeline will be released as it becomes available. So I'm going to hand this back over to Alex now to wrap up. Thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. It looks like we're still having an issue with the question asking module in the webinar, but as people have said, any questions that you folks have, we're all available if you'd like to reach out by phone or by email. This is our contact information. We're also going to be sending out the slides that we've gone through today after the conclusion of the presentation, and we're going to get a recording of this presentation out to all of you as soon as possible. And I'd like to just say thank you, and Thanks for sticking with us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.